Railway Conversations with Doc Frank.
Hello and welcome back to my podcast. I am Doc Frank, the host, and my guest today is Sita Brown from Sydney in Australia. Sita is currently the head of strategy corporate for Siemens in Australia and New Zealand, but this is not what we're going to talk about today. Rather, we want to focus on Sita's previous career in transport, in rail transport, and also her career sidestep, if you will, into charity work for Guide Dogs Australia. What I found and what you will hopefully find out during today's conversation as well is that Sita has been exceptionally good in balancing her career with the rest of her life. And I think there are some lessons and insights in there that you can take out, not just if you are a woman listening to that, but also, and maybe particularly so, if you are a man, because a number of things such as setting boundaries are equally important regardless of whether you are a working woman or a working man. Please enjoy this conversation. Hi, it's Doc Frank again. What can I say? Even the best CBTC training in the world arguably can get even better. And that's what's happened with the brand new 2024 Understanding CBTC Fundamentals training. This is an upgrade from the previous CBTC Kickstarter training that exists since 2014 and has been continuously refined, improved, and updated. You have a massive 30 video lessons that you can watch on demand as long as you live. You've got lifelong access. You can build a certifiable CBTC competency, and the certification is offered by me as well as an additional option. You do not need prior signaling knowledge for this training. Just imagine that you can learn the fundamentals of CBTC without needing to know anything about railway signaling before the training. So that really makes it suitable for anybody working in the railway industry and for anybody being interested in working in the railway industry. The training is topped up by an industry-leading Q&A support over at least 12 months. You can sign up for this fantastic training under docfranktraining.podia.com/CBTC. I repeat that, docfranktraining.podia.com/CBTC. And if you needed one additional argument, this course is actually cheaper than last year's training. So that's my way of helping you fighting inflation. Hope you enjoy, and I hope to see you at this CBTC training. Sita, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Frank. Excited to be here.
We haven't spoken for a long time, apart from a pre-talk that we had a couple of weeks ago about this podcast here. So I'm really excited to have you on the show. We did work together for a few months back at Thales. That was like an eternity ago, early 2011 or late 2010 or something like that. Tell us a little bit about your career in transport and what you liked about it, and also why you ended up leaving the transport industry, because as we speak at the moment, you are not working for transport right now.
Yeah, so nearly all of my career has been spent in the transport and infrastructure space in some way, shape or form. So I started my career actually with Sydney Ferries many, many years ago. In fact, that's where I met my husband. It was my first role after travelling overseas and coming and deciding to settle in Sydney. And it was actually sitting on the end of the wharf at Jetty 3 at Circular Quay on a pontoon over the water. So I think that was my introduction to transport, and I was like, wow, this is a pretty great work environment, sitting, out over Sydney Harbour. So I spent 4 years there and pretty much stayed in that space for the next 15 years. I don't think I consciously or deliberately thought, I want to have a career in this space, but it was the way that it panned out. So I spent time with Rail Corp. It was Rail Corp back then. Spent a little bit of time at some different engineering consultancies, and then I went on to work for Royal Bank of Scotland, who was ABN AMRO at the time, on some of their social infrastructure PPPs, so new schools, new hospitals, some big things they were bidding actually in South Australia at the time. And then I moved back to Sydney and started with Talus and spent 13 years at Talus. I started in their transport business. It was right at the beginning of the kind of formation of that business in Australia. And I spent 13 years there. So, yeah.
What did you like, other than this experience over Sydney Harbour? What did you like about the transport industry? Because there, you said you didn't deliberately plan your career there, but there must have been something that you liked about it to just stay there for such a long time.
Yeah. I think first and foremost, I really loved the people that I worked with. I think that for me, a lot of it was about the people. I think the complexity that comes with transport and that comes with working for an organisation like Talus, or like Siemens, which is where I am now. I think, just feeling like I was constantly learning. Even after 13 years with Talus, I felt like I was literally learning something new every day. So I think that the broad and varied kind of activities, the lovely people, the really smart people. I think I've come to learn that I love working with engineers as well. I think it would be the people and the complexity. Just feeling like I was always learning and challenged, and
I can relate to that. The intelligence, the average intelligence of the people you work with in those organizations. And I've basically done it the other way around from you. I spent 17 years with Siemens and then only 2.5 years or so with Thales. But in both companies, you meet a lot of very intelligent people. The average intelligence in those companies is very, very high. And it almost gets to a point where you think that's normal for a work environment. And it's only when you ever get out there and get to a different environment where not that many intelligent and highly paid people are working that you realize, oh, well, okay, maybe that wasn't normal. Maybe that was more the exception, but it was a nice exception,
Yeah, you're right. No, I totally agree. And then I think there's also the kind of societal impact that, connecting people and places and, people and communities. And so I think there's still that sense of, the societal good and kind of the impact that public transport has on people and communities. So there's that piece there as well.
Yeah. I think I wasn't quite sure where the right point would be to chip in that change of topic, but maybe it's just here. While you were at Thales, you were basically living a normal life in parallel, as everybody does.
Yeah,
but I think normal. But I think there is still a notable difference between men and women, in that when creating a family, women are the ones getting the children. Men are just the ones like having children in their household. How did you manage to build a family while still doing a challenging job in the transport industry? I think that's probably the right point in time to ask that question. Talk a little bit about this, what your strategies were. I think many have just a complete career break when the kids arrive. Many women, that is. but in your case, you seem to have found a way to basically build both things at the same time, which I found quite outstanding. And maybe you can talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think I would have to disagree with what you said. In 2024, I really don't think women still have that role as the primary carer. I think, in our house, my husband plays an equal role in parenting. And, it's always been that way. So, yeah, I don't think I don't even know if that still applies, to be honest. Like when I look at lots of my friends or family members or, people that are in a similar stage of life, I know families who, have stay-at-home dads and a working mum, or that share the load, really similar to Steve and I. So, sorry, a bit of a bird out the window there. But yeah, I don't think that traditional dynamic of the woman staying home and the man going to work still applies, and it certainly hasn't applied in our house. And so I think it's just been sharing the load, and it's been pretty equal. So my husband has his own business and a lot of flexibility, and so lots of peaks and troughs, ebbs and flows in his work, and sometimes he's here and he's with the kids and is doing all of the domestic stuff, and sometimes it's me. And so I think it's a really kind of equal parenting role. It's certainly not what you described.
Okay, so I choose to overhear that I was kind of called a dinosaur. But let's say it does.
So many people think that, Frank. So many people still say that. I had someone say to me the other day that they had a team of women, and so giving the women flexibility was really, really important, and something that was important to their team because they were all female. And I had to disagree and say, I don't think that still applies. I think in this day and age, I don't think that traditional men going to work and women staying home logic still applies. I think it's really different these days.
Well, the thing is, you probably can't make it work if you follow that traditional model. Yeah. So I think one of the takeaways here is that you do require a more flexible setup where the parenting is more distributed between both partners. In order to make this work, and maybe even to the extreme that if you are the one in a partnership who is doing the career and getting the most money in, then it may actually be the stay-at-home dad who says, well, okay, you keep doing your career and I look after the kids, and we have kind of a swap from the traditional role of parenting to something which is more suitable to our specific circumstance. And
that's right.
And I agree with you that probably changes more and more examples, so that the traditional old model, while still in many people's heads, hopefully not just in mine, there are more and more exceptions to that, to the point where it may no longer be the normal circumstance that the woman stays at home and looks after the kids. So tell me a bit more about this flexibility required. I mean, one of the things was obviously that you kind of shared the parenting, and that helped. But I think you had a few things in your work environment as well, which helped you, like pursuing your career without completely neglecting your role as a parent, because obviously you wouldn't want to neglect your children in order to make a career. So even though your partner had a stronger share in the common parenting, but still you needed to take care of you still having time for looking after your family. So
yeah, I think, you know, first and foremost, I want to be a present parent. Like, being a mum is my favourite thing in the whole world, and I will always put that family first above career. For me, it really is about family, and I love that family dynamic, and that's really precious to me. And so I think you're exactly right. You know, family will always come first for me. So trying to find the right balance where you can still have a successful career and you know, be a very present parent. You're right. It's a balance. The juggle struggle is real, and it can be exhausting. But I think it's, you know, putting in place boundaries for yourself first and foremost. I think if you don't put boundaries in place, no one else is going to do that for you. And so I think you need to be really clear on where your boundaries are. I think, you know, I've always been given a lot of trust and a lot of autonomy, so that's really helped. I've worked for some really great leaders that have given me a lot of trust and a lot of autonomy to have that balance. And I think that's only made me more committed to those organisations or to those roles at the time. And yeah, I think because I've had that freedom and it's been about results as opposed to kind of, you know, spending Monday to Friday, 9 to 5 at a desk in an office. It's that I haven't seen that mentality in ages, and it's been about, delivering results. And I think because I've had that and I've worked for those kinds of people, it's really motivated me to achieve and to be ambitious, because they've kind of given me their trust, and it's always motivated me to do the best I can and to deliver the best results that I can. I think it would have been counterproductive if someone had said to me, especially when I had kids and I did have that kind of juggle going on, if someone had said, you know, my expectation is that you need to be in the office 5 days a week, 8, 9, 10 hours a day, I would have been so disengaged by that I think I would never have been anywhere near as productive. You know, and there's the saying, if you want something done, give it to a busy person, right? I think I work well under pressure. I must love juggling and having a lot of balls in the air at the same time. And so I think, I just find ways to get things done. You learn to be really productive and really efficient, and working to a deadline and having a lot on my plate seems to motivate me for some strange reason.
I think what you said about boundaries is, one, it's very true. And secondly, I think that's something that even the men listening to this should use as a takeaway. Because it's not just when you try to be there for your family, it's also if you try to avoid ongoing work weeks of 80, 90, 100 hours, that there need to be boundaries. There need to be a point where you can say after 10 hours of work or after 9 hours of work or so, that's enough for the day. Thank you very much. I'm going home now. And I'm not staying in there because of some either imaginary or real expectations from other people, from your managers, from your bosses, and so on. So I think setting healthy boundaries is something that everybody can take away as a recommendation for healthier balance between the work life and everything else around. And with regards to the management, I think it's really that's an important takeaway for managers, that providing your employees, trust to do a decent job, even with or while having those boundaries. And secondly, providing some flexibility is really a strong argument towards a company. And that was clearly visible during COVID for me, that there were some companies still providing a very old school approach, like, you need to be back in the office as quickly as possible, because only then I can be certain that you really do some work, which is nonsense, of course. And then other companies more embracing this hybrid work models with working from home in between, giving more trust to the employees. And I think those companies could really thrive during those periods because they establish themselves as a more attractive employer.
I totally agree. And I think, I had that flexibility from the point I had my first daughter, which was nearly 9 years ago, and I was going back to work. So I managed to have that hybrid arrangement all the way back then, where I did a couple of days in the office and a couple of days at home, or I think I went back 3 days a week. And so, yeah, you're right. It fundamentally comes down to trust, doesn't it? And I think COVID certainly accelerated that thinking. People didn't have a choice. We were mandated to work from home for a period of time. And, I am sure a lot of people did, struggle with that trust piece, trusting their teams. If you didn't have eyes on your team, were they working? If their green light wasn't on Teams, were they at their desk, or were they, going for a surf down the beach or whatever? I think, you had to put trust in your team, and you had to be focused on results and outcomes and less focused on watching the clock. And, some of us had to do homeschooling, and the boundaries between work and life were totally blurred, weren't they? In fact, I think it almost went the other way towards the end, where you were always on for work because everything was so fluid, and you had to be more deliberate, I think, in the end of those kind of COVID lockdowns to put in place the boundaries between home and work, because it was all kind of blending into one for a period there.
Yeah, I was going to say that's where the boundaries have to come back in again. But you're right. The temptation clearly was during the lockdowns to basically do work all the time, and suddenly you don't have weekends anymore, and you don't have like work closer in the evenings anymore, and stuff like that. So you mentioned that an employer that expecting from you to be in the office like 5 days a week for a certain number of hours wouldn't really have suited you. You mentioned an example previously in the pre-chat where you were in a situation where a potential employer expected something like this from you. Maybe you can talk about that example and what you ended up deciding for yourself.
Yeah. So I actually got approached about a role a couple of years ago now for basically a software company, tech company. And I had a couple of conversations about the role, and I think my experience was quite well suited to the role and to the organisation. It felt like kind of I would be the right fit for the team. It all kind of felt really positive. And I received an offer from them, and I said, what's your kind of flexible work arrangements? What do you have in place? Would you be open to me doing a 4-day week? At this time I had a toddler, and she was still in daycare, and I didn't work a Friday, and I had Fridays at home with her. And they were just not at all receptive to the idea. And I probably went backwards and forwards with the CEO 3 or 4 times. About the concept of doing a full-time week in a full-time role in 4 days. And the answer kept coming back, what, you want me to pay you full-time, but you're only going to do a part-time effort? And I said, absolutely not. Like, I'll deliver a full-time effort, but I'll do it in a way that I try and manage the majority of that over 4 days. And I've done that at TELUS, and it had worked really well. I probably went backwards and forwards with the CEO 3 or 4 times, and they kept sort of saying, like, how can we change your mind? What do we need to do to have you accept the role? And I got to the point where I said, I just don't think you understand where I'm coming from. And it clearly wasn't going to work, and it wasn't the right culture or the right, it just wasn't going to be the right environment for me. So I turned the role down. But it was really interesting to be in a situation where I thought that I had to really fight for that and try and kind of influence the CEO's thinking around how I would make that work, and the fact that I had demonstrated that for a number of years previously and it had worked well in another organisation. But yeah, it didn't work out, and it was obviously for the best because it wasn't meant to be, and much more exciting things have happened since. But yeah, it was interesting nonetheless.
Yeah, I can't help the impression that there are mindsets behind that thing where people think, okay, well, if you do 4 days a week to do a full week's job, like instead of 5 times 8 hours, you're just working 4 days of 10 hours each. I could imagine that the thinking behind that was, yes, but if you were in the office 5 days a week, you would probably work 5 times 10 hours. Yeah, which is more effort and hopefully more output than just working 4 times 10 hours. So over 4 days, you've got to keep your boundaries tighter compared to a 5-day rule. And I think the underlying issue is similar to the ones during work from home, whether you do real work or not. I mean, if you think in order to function properly, you need to spend 2 hours every day during the daytime with your kids, because that's the time when they always want to play. And it's in the morning between like 8 and 9, they want to play. So you can either reject this and then have trouble with your kids all day while trying to work from home, or you can just play with them for an hour and then they are happy to go away for the rest of the day and you can work in a more focused way. And by doing so, your output would be just as good, if not better, as if you had just sat there the whole day rejecting your kids, rejecting everything, rejecting your own life requirements. So people seem to think, all right, but if you have this much output, which is fantastic, in only 4 hours of work a day, if you worked 8 hours a day, you would have twice that fantastic output. And this is just a math that doesn't work. It doesn't work like this.
Well, I think there's so many studies, isn't there, especially of late, that sort of say that you're only truly productive for a certain number of hours a day. And I think it's something like 3 or 4 hours. It's certainly not 8 or 10 hours. So I think irrespective of people's circumstances, home life, whatever that looks like for different people, I think you need balance, right? Your whole life can't be focused on your career, because then you don't have that balance. And you've got to look after your health and your well-being, and that whole picture, I think, is really important. And yeah, if you're only productive for so many hours a day, I think it comes back to that point of measuring output and results as opposed to time spent at a computer. It's about working smarter, not harder, like all of those things. Yeah. And some days you might work 10 or 12 hours. You might need to travel. You might have customer meetings. You might have whatever it is. There's always going to be bigger days and smaller days. And I think it's just about managing the ebbs and flows. And like I said, really just being more focused on the output and the results.
Yeah. I think the problem always comes up when people think that their employees are machines rather like humans. Yeah, this notion that, well, I'm paying you for 8 hours a day, so I expect you to put 8 hours of work in every day, if not more, so that I'm not out of pocket. This is a nonsensical notion, yeah, rather than saying I'm paying you for a day of productive work. And if you only need, 4 hours to perform and to produce the outputs of that one day of productive work, then so be it. Yeah. And if you're more efficient and you only need 2 hours, well, that's fantastic. Yeah.
Good for you. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, but then this thinking comes in like, okay, well, if you can produce this much in 2 hours, just imagine you could do 4 times as much if you do the same thing for 8 hours. But you just can't multiply this. This is not how it works. Yeah, because your productivity will go down and your motivation will go down. And So
Yeah, I think the motivation bit is key as well. I think, being engaged, and, there's multiple different things that drives engagement for different people. But I think when you do feel engaged, and that connection to the organisation that you're working for, then it becomes much easier, right? And there will be days, of course, everyone's going to work 10, 12-hour days sometimes. And, you'll have deadlines and all of that sort of stuff, and that's fine. I just don't think it's sustainable to expect that people do that every day, every week, year on year. Like, it just doesn't stack up. I think fundamentally it's about kind of putting trust into your teams, right? And empowering them and giving them flexibility. But of course, being clear on expectations, like, you're not going to give total autonomy and flexibility to someone that continues to miss deadlines and not deliver, and, it becomes a different conversation then. But, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and I had this before, trying to set my own boundaries where I was working on a bid, and the bid environment very, very well from your
Yes.
career at Thales, where I basically said, okay, well, I put a whole Saturday in of work. So now 3 weeks later, when the bid's out, I just take a whole Monday off. Even though it's a work day, I'm just compensating for the weekend that I spent over there, putting work in. Yeah. And
All the 6 months of solid effort.
yeah. So and there was some pushback actually on that, like the notion how I could want to get compensated for weekend work. It was almost like, yeah, but the weekend work was necessary. And I said, well, yeah, but it's also necessary to take a weekday off to compensate for that, because otherwise I'm just giving you free work. And then it dawned on me that maybe that's what they expected. Yeah, that
I think bids is a great example. I think I spent like 10 years of doing bids, and it wasn't until I had my kids that I thought, this is not sustainable. This isn't going to work with having a young family. But you're right. You can work ridiculous hours and, weeks on end, months on end to get a bid in the box. And bids have this habit of consuming every last second available. I don't know how, but for whatever reason, it always seems to come down to the wire, and you can have these great intentions of submitting a day early or a week early. It just never works out like that, no matter how organised you are and how well you've planned the bid out. They always consume every last second, in my experience. And you're right, you run on adrenaline for a long period of time, and it's so exciting. There's such an amazing sense of camaraderie and team spirit, and I loved doing bids, but you get to the end of that and you put that bid in, and then there's this kind of like, I don't know, you run on adrenaline for so long that you can kind of feel this lull or this dip, and your energy's really low. And I think often people get sick. You might take a few days off to try and recoup, and you'll often end up getting sick because you've just run on adrenaline for so long. So yeah, it's crazy. Of course, you can't operate like that and then rock up the next day. Frank, I've got to tell you a funny story. I was working on a bid quite a few years ago, same kind of situation, really big transport bid, and everyone had been burning the candle at both ends for many, many months, and we were down to the wire, and I think we were submitting a BAFO or something, and I came into the office at about 7 o'clock in the morning. I'd probably gone home at midnight, and I'd come back early because we had to get the bid out. And the most senior person in that business was asleep on the couch in their office and had slept the night. Like, that's just an example of doing what you've got to do, and woke up at 7 a.m. back into it, but had literally slept in their office for the night. And they'll know who they are if they watch this. Yeah.
Yeah. But you do need time to recharge your batteries. Yeah, and
Yeah.
it wouldn't be sustainable to have this amount of effort where you run on adrenaline and then do it again and again and again and again without any
No.
interruption, without any taking any leave. The project business is very similar to
Yeah.
bits as well, where I've had people on project teams who haven't taken leave for like 10 years. Because they always thought, well, I take leave when that project is over, but that project coming towards the end, there's a new project ramping up where they are immediately needed and so on. And so they just keep pushing this along, and then, it's just not healthy. It's just not healthy. And productivity really does go down. And that's the thing that I thought of earlier.
Yeah.
If you really put in 3 hours of really focused work, and most people, I think they're not even capable of putting in 3 hours of focused work, because they don't even know what that is, to really concentrate for 3 hours without getting themselves distracted. After 3 hours of focused work, you're just done. You're just done. You just say, well, if I don't take a break now by having some fresh air, going for a walk, and maybe going to the beach, having a swim or something like that.
Yeah.
You can't, you're just drained. Your brain is just gone. And you can achieve so much. Your output can be so enormous in 3 hours of focused work that it can literally be enough for the day. Yeah. And if people were really measuring like the amount of concentration that they can bring up during a normal workday, they would probably realize that even over an 8-hour or 10-hour day, the amount of really focused work in summary is way less than 3 hours, way less. Yeah. So that if somebody could really focus for 3 hours would probably achieve a much higher productivity. And then they would have deserved their break. They would have deserved to just call it a day and rather be fit the next day to put in another 3 hours of focused work. Right?
Agree.
When you left the transport industry, you ventured into something entirely different, which is non-for-profit business. Talk to us a little bit about guide dogs in the few minutes that we have left.
Yeah, sure. So I'd been with Talus for 13 years. I'd kind of grown up in Talus to a degree. All of my leadership career had been with Talus, and I'd had a great career there, and I'd loved it. I think when you look across the organisation, the average tenure is like, 20, 30 years. And I thought that could so easily be me. But I'd always wanted to work in the charity sector. I'd done a bit of volunteering in my own time. In fact, I took a career break from Talus for 6 months, and my husband and I went and lived in Africa, in Kenya, and volunteered over there for 6 months with a small grassroots children's charity. My husband's Indigenous, and I've got a big Indigenous family, and so I grew up on an Aboriginal community as a child, actually. So I'd always kind of wanted to do something with marginalised people and communities. I always I wanted to work in that charity space, and so I had done some things in my personal life or spent some time volunteering or whatever, but I got to the point, particularly post-COVID, when we all had that kind of, what am I doing with my life moment? And thought, I want to make a change. And I've loved being in the transport space, and I've had an amazing career here, but I wanted to go work for a charity and experience it firsthand. And I spoke to a few people as I started to look to make the transition. And the feedback I got, the kind of resounding feedback, was maybe not now. Maybe this isn't the right time in your life when you have a young family and, a big mortgage and, financial pressures, and you choose to live in Sydney in the eastern suburbs, and, maybe revisit this in 10 years. And I was stubborn, and I was like, no, I've wanted to do this forever. It's now or never. I was at the point where I just needed a change, and I wanted to do something different. And I also wanted to prove myself in a new industry and a new organisation and know if I could be successful, because I'd spent so long at Talus. So I got the role at Guide Dogs as Head of National Corporate Partnerships, which is basically just looking after corporate giving. So being accountable for all of their corporate giving activities, so charitable partnerships with big corporates. So I spent 20 months there, nearly 2 years, just short of 2 years. But in fact, when I was in the middle of the interview process and I found out I was pregnant with my third child, which was very, very unplanned. And so it was probably not the ideal time to be leaving corporate, taking half of the salary and walking away from 20 weeks of maternity leave and starting a new role that I knew I would only be able to be in for 6 months, and then I'd have to go on maternity leave. So the timing wasn't ideal, but it was just the way it panned out. And so, I went to Guide Dogs. I had an incredibly supportive manager who I said to in the interview process, look, this is completely unplanned, but this is the situation. I'm probably 4 weeks pregnant or 5 weeks pregnant. Who knows how it will pan out? But, I'm in my 40s, unplanned. I don't even know if this will happen. But she was very supportive and hired me. And so I spent 6 months with Guide Dogs. I then had a 5-month maternity leave break and went back when my daughter was 5 months. And then I was there for another, 8 or 9 months. So it was a little bit disjointed, my time there, but amazing. It was great to work with an organisation where you genuinely felt a connection to the purpose and to the cause, and I think that's what I desperately wanted and why I wanted to work in the charity sector. So it was great. I had a beautiful team, a really, really great team. I really enjoyed it. It was a real eye-opener to do something very different to transport. And I think I went from working with 80% men to 90% women, very different backgrounds, demographics, just a really, really different, completely different to what I was used to. So I certainly got the change I was looking for. I got some experience in the charity sector and I absolutely loved it. But as you know, I decided to go back to corporate very recently and took a role as head of strategy at Siemens for Siemens Australia and New Zealand. I think it feels familiar. It feels like the perfect mix. I'm only 4 weeks in, but it feels like the perfect mix of familiar and new and exciting. And Siemens has a huge sustainability focus in Australia, and so I still feel a good connection to that, and they're doing some amazing work. So I think I still have that sense of connection. But charity sector was very different to what I was used to. It was almost night and day in every respect. But in hindsight, maybe I should have listened to the advice that maybe it's something I want to do in 10 years' time. When I'm at a different stage in my life and a different stage in my career. So I'm certainly not done with the not-for-profit sector. I did love my time with Guide Dogs and just feeling that genuine connection to the mission.
Well, it's definitely good. I mean, if I can give you that feedback, that you look back at that time as a positive experience and not just say, oh my God, that was such a big mistake. I should never have done this and so on. And I could imagine that happens often to people who have certain romanticized ideas of how charity work looks like, and then they get completely disillusioned when they suddenly realize, oh well, this is all about money, because charity organizations cannot work without funding, without money, and if you don't care about money in those organizations, you're not getting anywhere. So and for many people that's really something that they've never thought about, and where they get really disillusioned maybe and saying, well, I didn't think it would be like this. I think it would be just like, well, getting a new dog to walk every day or something like that. I
Yeah.
don't know, but happy
Well,
that you.
we did have dogs in the office, which was a huge draw card. I mean, being surrounded by Labrador puppies in the office was certainly
Oh,
amazing.
yeah. That's awesomely cute. Definitely. Yeah.
But no, you're right. And I think besides really, Guide Dogs is an iconic charity. It's an iconic Australian charity. It's an incredible brand. So I think, that worked in my favour. It wasn't like I was working for a really obscure organisation that nobody knew. And the scope of my role was really focused on two things. It was relationship management, so kind of stewarding those relationships with existing partners, and income generation. So it wasn't too dissimilar from the types of roles I'd had before, in terms of kind of, account management, account director, sales, BD, whatever. So I think I could still really draw on those skills, albeit in a slightly different setting. So yeah, I think it was still very relevant in terms of the type of role, but just completely different from a kind of industry perspective.
That kinds of...
And I missed the engineers, I have to say. I missed the complexity that comes with working for an organisation like a Siemens or I missed the complexity, and dare I say it, I probably missed working with engineers.
That's the other thing which I think is a good outcome, that you managed to get back to the corporate world and you weren't lost to the charity work forever, because once you're over there you're basically considered a lost case by the corporate industry. That's obviously not the case, so that's a good outcome as well. Sita, I'm conscious of your time. In your new role, you must be extremely busy, and you've already spent a lot of time here with me in that conversation. So I would like to thank you very much. I cross my fingers, or actually, I probably don't need to cross my fingers, because I'm confident that you will be able to maintain your work-life balance in the future as well. Well, it's a terrible term. It's probably so much abused for so long, work-life balance. But I think if there's anything to be taken away from today's conversation, it's really that it's important to set boundaries for yourself, and you aspire a healthy balance between the professional work you do and the other aspects of your life. And if you neglect one over the other, that's not healthy and not sustainable in the long run. So thanks very much for making that time, and thank you for being so open and honest about all these things affecting your life, not just your career.
Thanks, Frank. It was so lovely to chat to you and to reconnect with you after so long.
Thank you, Sita. Thank you. Have a good day. Bye-bye. Hi, this is Doc Frank. I need to tell you about my brand new cutting edge 2024 training, Digital Signaling Interoperability. Interoperability is such a huge issue, not just here in Australia, but in other countries as well. Everywhere where you've got different railway authorities with cross traffics between each other. This course has the latest insights, the latest research. This training includes the SPA framework, Systems, Products and Applications, which creates a lot of clarity and avoids confusion in that area. We then look at the different technologies for digital signaling in Australia. And this is just an example that is transferable to many, many other countries in the world. We then give detailed introductions to the main technologies used in Australia, which are CBTC, ETCS and ATMS. Then we discuss the hierarchy of interoperability controls, the different ways how interoperability can be handled and addressed. A special session on CBTC interoperability between CBTC products from different suppliers. Then we look at ETCS interoperability. And if you think that comes automatic just by using ETCS, you need to think again. This lesson will address how interoperability in practice can be achieved with ETCS, and it does require some work. And then lastly, interoperability between different technologies. What is required to do that, to achieve that? Which options are available and what is arguably the best? You can get access to this fantastic brand new training under docfranktraining.podia.com/interoperability. I repeat that again, docfranktraining.podia.com/interoperability. If this is a topic of concern for you and your Revware organization, then don't miss this training. Hi, it's Doc Frank again. I hope you liked today's episode. I like to keep it as simple as possible, so I only have one single request for you. If you like this podcast, please tell your friends and colleagues about it. That's all I want, because that's a service that I'm providing to the industry, and I would like as many people as possible to listen to this podcast and learn something from it. So please share. And until next time, keep it simple and bye for now. Thank you for listening.